Hello, fellow homebrewers. JP here, and I want to introduce to you the brand new Brew-Built X1 Conical Series available at More Beer. More Beer sells the highest standard in homebrewing equipment, and the Brew-Built Conicals are just that. They're made from mirror-polished 304 stainless steel, and they come with loads of features that you and I have been looking for. They have a full 2-inch bottom dump valve, which will eliminate your clogging issues, while the sturdy base includes 4 reinforced legs, just like those big Pro tanks do. More Beer also carries the Brew-Built line of options and add-ons like casters, pressure kits, and even external glycol chillers. So you can find out more about the new Brew-Built X1 Conical Unitanks by going over to morebeer.com for detailed videos on the entire line of Brew-Built Conicals. You can trust Brew-Built with your next fermentation, and you can trust More Beer to find the right conical for you. Brew-Built at morebeer.com.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the session. I'm your host, Justin Crosley, back in the studio, all the way from Denver, actually. I just spent the last week in Denver for the Great American Beer Festival, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But I got a fun show for you today. Hailing all the way from Canada, Blind Enthusiasm Brewing Company is here. We're going to meet Greg and talk about what's happening there. First, thanks to our sponsor, More Beer. They bring you this show and every show that we do. You can go to morebeer.com and check them out. Thank them so much from the bottom of your heart and mine. And check them out on YouTube. Go to the YouTube channel. That's where they give away a bunch of cool stuff and show you how to use cool stuff. The Brewing Network loves More Beer, I promise you. They're good people. All right. Let's get right to it, shall we, Greg? I've got Greg from Blind Enthusiasm. Greg, I didn't even bother asking you how to pronounce your last name because I knew I'd forget it by the time we...
Take a shot.
Zeshuk.
Yeah, or Zeschuk. Zeshuk is probably the correct spelling, like... originally, but as we call Louise, Zeschuk, nice and phonetic, super easy. So
Zeschuk.
Yeah, it's good.
What's your background?
It's mainly Ukrainian and a bit of Polish, and you know, that's from that cool part. I mean, I'm third generation, so it's a long time ago.
Got it. Yeah, Zeschuk is way easier, isn't it?
It is.
So.
It's not fancy.
It's so funny, like, as soon as I pick a name phonetically, it's always the opposite, right? Yeah. I was like, no, it was Zeshuk. Fuck.
No, that's probably the right way to say it.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the show. Blind Enthusiasm's from Edmonton, Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
Edmonton, Alberta. There's the province.
Straight north of Montana. So if you go straight north of the middle of Montana, we're up there. We're about 300 miles from the border. We're north of Calgary. Calgary's just between us and the border.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been running about 7 years up there.
Here's the start of my stupid questions for the day. Yeah. So it's the most freezing place on earth, right? Or close to it. So I love Montana, but I've only been in the summer. And everyone from Montana, they don't want Californians there anyway, but they also said to me, before you decide you love Montana, spend a winter here, because they're brutal, right? But you're saying you're even north of that.
Yeah, they're mild in Montana.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it gets cold. I mean, it's interesting, because once you adapt to it, it's not bad, because you can always dress. But I mean, coldest it gets is around minus 40. That's where Fahrenheit and Celsius kind of like cross. It's very commonly in the 30s, minus 30s or minus 20s. But that's just like a week or two.
So you have to like plug in your engine at night, kind of cold, right?
Yeah, if you're outside, you have we have block heaters in our cars that actually run a little heater in the car overnight so they don't freeze solid, which they will if you don't.
Right. And that's starting soon, I assume. Is it cooling off now? Or?
Oh, yeah, it's starting to get cool. I think next week, and you know, it's funny because it warms my heart as a spontaneous brewer. Next week's spontaneous season. As soon as we get to hovering around freezing, above and below, that's when we start brewing spontaneous. So it's just starting to get to freezing at night this coming week.
Okay, we're going to talk more about that, hold that thought, because that sounds opposite to me. That sounds curious to me. So now I'm going to have to find out about that.
Yeah.
All right, a couple other things I got to take care of. Make sure you support all of our sponsors, including Williams Brewing. Go to williamsbrewing.com. They've been with me since the beginning, too. Just great people and a great shop there. Go to williamsbrewing.com. Don't forget about the 21st Amendment, and don't forget about Beersmith, the Beersmith brewing software, which I'll tell you about later in the show, too. And you can always support the show yourselves by doing your Amazon shopping. Just click the Amazon links on our homepage. We used to have an Amazon Canada link, too. But you Canadians didn't buy enough for me, so they canceled me.
Sorry. But I tried.
But those of you in the U.S. and I believe still the U.K. can support us by just, buy all your normal Amazon stuff. Just start with the link on our homepage, and it helps us a ton. That's a great way to support us, and then, of course, by supporting our sponsors. Okay, and then before we dive a little more into Blind Enthusiasm, I wanted to talk a little about the Great American Beer Festival, if you don't mind. Even though I guess Canadians aren't allowed to enter.
We are not.
No, but do you enter the World Beer Cup?
We do. I did once. I did 2 years ago. I did. We actually one of our beers did. They tell you kind of how you did. One got really close, and that was kind of sad. I think it was in the last round. And then we didn't last year, but we're going to be doing it this year. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I believe, and rightly so, I get more viewers for our World Beer Cup broadcast than I do our Great American Beer Festival. And you know where the World Beer Cup is, and the conference is taking place next year, don't you?
No, I can't remember.
Las Vegas, man.
So that sounds dangerous.
Get your liver ready now for that. Yeah. But anyhow, this year's Great American Beer Festival, I had a good time. It went great. The awards went great. The hall was massive, and then I think slightly less people, so you could really get around. It's a good time to think about going to JBF next year, because I think they've got it pretty dialed in. It was comfortable. It was fun. The beers were great. But I wanted to give a few shout-outs. I love streaming the awards. So I've been streaming the awards in some capacity for 17 years. We started out just doing streaming audio, because back then you couldn't even do streaming video. Maybe if you were like CBS or something, you need like massive trucks worth of equipment. But I've been streaming the audio since way back when. And of all the things I do at the Brewing Network, the award ceremony streaming, I think, are my favorite. It's never gotten old for me. Like, I love seeing you guys up on stage winning. It just means so much, right? And my listeners have heard me say this before. So this year was no different. I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of the winners. Like, one of the breweries of the year are a couple of my best friends, Brendan and Celeste, from Liquid Gravity Brewing Company. They opened in 2019, and they just won Brewery of the Year. And I think that's in like the 2,000 barrel size. So I think it's like mid-size. I don't know what they call them anymore. But what they won 3 medals and then points on other things. Like, you name it, they just killed it. So I just want to give a shout out to them. I want to give a shout out to a new brewery, but not new brewers, and that's Shred. So Shred Beer Company's been open for like less than 6 months. Brewery of the Year. But listen to the size. So you can imagine, since they just opened, it's a fairly small size. It's listed on the medal as 0 to 200 barrels. Shouldn't they just say like 200 barrels? Because was anybody going to win with 0 barrels? It's just a weird description. But Zach came from, he's come from a few places, but his most recent brewery up here was Slice. He left there, opened Shred, and just they immediately kill it. And it was just so cool to see. And by the way, it's not just Zach. It's an amazing team of Zach Frasher and Amy Heller. And Amy, just a solid, amazing brewer, just like Zach. So I just wanted to give a special shout out to those folks for doing it. And then, a brewery that I've never even heard of, and I don't know, I just saw them win so many medals. I got to give them a call and see if they'll do the show. But Third Eye Brewing Company out of Sharonville, Ohio. Never been, never heard of it, don't know the brewery. But as I'm back there doing, streaming the awards, I just name called. They just kept winning. And I always like to see that. You don't have to be my friend for me to be stoked for you. So I was really happy for them. Third Eye Brewing Company, just a shout out from way out here in California. Love to have you on the show. So if you hear this, reach out to me. Otherwise, you're going to be hearing from me soon. And that's about it. Just a fun time. I work the whole time. There's all sorts of events around the GABF. So if you ever get to go, you should go and do all that other stuff. I stay in the hall doing my thing, but it's a great time. And I want to thank the Brewers Association for hosting me, putting it on, and letting me be their official webcast after all these years. I've screwed it up a couple times, and they still let me do it. I haven't screwed it up in a while, so Maybe that's
they
why.
have confidence.
Yeah, exactly. Well, why don't we start by pouring a little bit of our first beer?
Yep.
And while you're doing that, if you can pop and talk, I don't know.
Yeah, I can. I got skills.
Why don't we talk a little history of Blind Enthusiasm and your history, of course, first. And you're the owner.
I'm the owner. Yeah.
Yeah.
I come here by way of a very strange track.
Okay.
I am trained initially as a medical doctor. Then I started a video game company called BioWare that made games like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars, The Old Republic. So I worked for about 20 years in video games.
Okay.
Then we sold our company to Electronic Arts.
Wow.
And I started a beer show called The Beer Diaries down in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Got to know a lot of the guys down there. And then
So you were into beer that whole time, obviously.
Interestingly, I was really into beer when I was young. And then I was kind of always, I remember, like, I lived in Ohio for a year, so I found, like, this was in the early 90s, I found Pete's Wicked Ale. I'm like, I got to get this Pete's Wicked Ale. And then finally, when I was in Austin, that's when I got really back into it. And I had a friend come over from San Francisco, and he said, hey, let's go to the Ginger Man. They got some amazing beers there.
Great place.
Yeah, and I just got into it. And the coolest thing was I was there with a number of people that were traveling as well. Like, I would travel back and forth from Canada. And the guys, I got to meet the guys at Jester King when they got started, like Jeff and Ron. And as they got started, it was like cool because I could go hang out at their place on the weekends. I wasn't working and just kind of see what they did. And that was probably the biggest inspiration for us doing, spontaneous mixed ferments. And it kind of went from there where I kind of got into it. So what we actually happen to be drinking a spontaneous beer right now.
Excellent.
Our first launch was Spontaneous Manifesto, first spontaneous launch. This is it's been through a plane, it's been through a rolly bag, and so it's usually, there's a little bit of sediment, so it's kicked up a bit, but
sure,
it'll still be pretty delicate.
Okay.
So this beer is a blend of 1, 2, and 3-year-old, equal parts of like spontaneous beer. We've been doing spontaneous about 6 years, and this is like the best of what we've had so far.
You're careful not to call it lambic.
Correct.
Or 3 years of lambic. It is spontaneous because that has to be from Belgium, right?
It doesn't. You could in theory, but our friends in Belgium would beat us up.
Okay, right. They just don't love it. Yeah.
Well, no, I think we out of respect don't use those terms. Like, we don't use creek, we don't use lambic, and I understand how some people feel they may want to say something style, but we know those guys. Like Doug, my head brewer, worked at Cantillon.
Nice.
We know Jean. We know a whole bunch of the guys in Belgium, and so it's kind of like, out of respect, we don't use it. We got to make our own way.
Sure.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So this delicate's interesting, like a lot of very fruit forward, like a lot of stone fruit.
Yeah. So kind of a sharp, tart acidity. I don't mean over acidic. It's not Rodenbach here.
Yeah.
But just a nice sharp tartness there. It's super clean. But yeah, stone fruit peach up front.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of peach.
Cherry as well, right? Like there's some cherry mixed in.
Yeah. Almost like and maybe that's the sharp tart I'm getting, like a cherry skin.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then there's a little bit, and it's because it's spontaneous, it's got 3-year-old, there is a little bit of the leather and the it's a tobacco, and that'll kind of come forward more with time. Like these will age 10, 15 years. We cap and cork. These are made to be aging beers, collecting beers. And
wow.
You can drink them today. I mean, like when I tell like consumers that don't know this kind of beer, I say, hey, it's kind of like almost like a natural wine or champagne or beer, somewhere in the mix of all those things. And they're usually blown away because they've never seen this flavor profile before.
For sure. Let me ask you about aging real quick.
Yeah.
So you said you listened to Sour Hour, right?
I did, yeah.
I didn't listen to a lot of it, but I was in the studio once listening to Jay answer a question about aging. And it kind of surprised me coming from Jay and the Rare Barrel. And the question was, of course, how long should we age our beers and this and that? And I've always heard varying degrees of answers, right? Yeah, it depends on how you store it, et cetera, et cetera. But he had a pretty upfront answer before all of those. And that was, the beer's never going to be as good as when it leaves the brewery. Everything after that is different. He didn't say bad, he didn't say whatever, but he said, if you're asking me when the peak of the beer is, it's when I let it leave the brewery, and it'll never be better than that. What do you think about that?
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I thought you might not, yeah. And I've never heard another brewer say it either.
It depends, right? Like, I think what I would say, what's interesting, he has a very important point that I think he's making there, is that, like, we condition this beer for 10 months. Like, it actually will usually have gotten sick in the process.
Sure.
Like,
explain that for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, so Pediococcus will exude glycopolysaccharides. It's sort of like almost like a food source, and the beer will get a thickness to it, almost like
slimy.
Slimy. We hate to use the word snotty. You'll often see guys like putting public service warnings that haven't held their beers long enough, that because about 3-4 months in, that's what happens. You have to wait till that happens, and it resorbs. It's part of the natural process for Pediococcus. And it resorbs that glycopolysaccharide, and it goes back into the cells, and it cleans right up. It actually gets almost a little lemony note to it. So what Jay's saying is true, is that we don't let any beer go until we think it's as good as it can be right now.
Okay,
it's 10. We usually do 10 months of bottle conditioning.
And then, of course, you crack some open and make sure everything's good, I assume.
Oh, yeah, we crack continually. So starting about 6 months, we start checking it.
Yeah.
Make sure carbonation's there. But then, they're super cool. Like, a good example, we had one, it was a French dry hop, Bar Rouge Mistral, and it was like, after 4-year-old bottle is phenomenal. It's better than when we opened it. Like,
wow.
I mean, and we've had, if you wait 25 years, it'll be very different. Like, mostly, like, what'll happen typically in a beer like this, the Spontaneous Manifesto, the fruitiness will drop a bit, the savory elements will come forward a little bit, and it just won't have the same fruit forwardness, but it comes down to structure. It's very much like aging a wine. There's a structure, the acidity, the alcohol, those things work together to support it. But so it will get better with time in a lot of cases. It won't. Sometimes there's a point where it isn't, but then that could be like, we don't know yet, but we're at least 5 years in on these beers, and some of them are still absolutely
getting
phenomenal.
better.
They're phenomenal. Yeah, like, it's crazy.
No Brettanomyces in this beer?
Oh, yeah, there's Brett.
Yeah, there is? Yeah.
So this, as a spontaneous beer, we've actually been doing a pretty gigantic research study. So we actually are doing a very large research study with our local university. So we know there's only huge number of microorganisms in this. There's multiple strains of Brett.
Okay.
We're in a couple of years, we'll start releasing papers based on our research. We have my head brewer, we have a guy that's got a PhD in fermentation science. That's our research assistant. He's through the university, but he works with us researching this stuff. So there's Brett, there's so much stuff in here, and the spontaneous, it's crazy. Our mixed ferment, there's Brett as well. We pitch Brett.
Okay.
But we pitch about 5 or 6 microorganisms, but the spontaneous has like the kitchen sink. It's just unbelievable how much stuff is in there.
And is it spontaneous in the sense of like a cool ship and a bunch of open windows?
Yeah.
Oh, it is, right.
Oh, it's for reals.
Did you inoculate anything in this particular one?
No.
So 100%.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we do...
It's so clean for that.
Well, yeah, we've refined our process. We have a true turbine mashing system. So I said Doug worked at Cantillon. He got permission from Jean. He got permission from the guys from Dre to measure their systems. We recreated a turbine mashing system up in Canada using the guys from Specific Mechanical. So we only turbine mash our building. We don't do any normal mash.
Wow.
So that's like the multi-step liquid decoctions, the 3.5-hour boils. And then at this point, about half goes into the cool ship and half goes into a vessel where we will, but not blended. Like, we actually do, this is one of the crazy things we do. So we do pure spontaneous beers, we do pure mixed beers, and we have been mixing spontaneous and
inoculated
spontaneous and adding mixed and spontaneous together. So it's actually super cool because they're extra fruity.
Right.
And so we're doing a lot of neat stuff, but it all comes from the exact same wort. It's always the same. But it's true spontaneous with cool ship and everything.
It's delicious.
Thank you.
That surprises me. I never would have guessed. I wouldn't have been upset by calling it a spontaneously fermented beer, but I thought, no, this is pitched. This is inoculated.
We've got like 5 or 6 more coming this year. We're doing a lot of beers. Like, we have over 500 puncheons in our building.
Okay.
Like, we do 100,000 bottles, but 50,000 of them will be spontaneous. This is like a reveal in a sense. Like, we're going hard into this in a big way because that's what we're passionate about.
Sure. Okay. So let's go back to how you started. You get turned on by these beers after through friends and the Ginger Man, but how do you end up getting into a brewery?
So when I was working at BioWare, like I said, I kind of knew I was going to retire. I kind of said, I'm done. I've been working about 20 years. We'd sold the company to Electronic Arts, so I was very fortunate on the financial side.
Great.
That makes it easier to run a brewery, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, at least something a hole for you to dump your money into.
Yeah, which is spontaneous beer.
yeah, exactly.
But and then like I kind of got this inkling that I wanted to, like, after it's kind of after interviewing Jeff from Jester King, I'm like, man, you know what? I want to do a beer show. I want to interview brewers, and so I did this show called The Beer Diaries.
Okay,
and they're still on the internet. They're still on YouTube. And I did this show where I would go and do these long-form interviews at the breweries, discuss with them like the beers, and it'd be usually cut down to about a 30-minute interview, way ahead of its time. This was like, the first ones are probably 2010, 2011 maybe. And I did that for a couple of years. And I did one season in Austin, and I did one season in Colorado, all around Colorado, and then.
So just traveling around recording, a little recording kit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, me, I had a crew. I had 2 or 3 people with me and a sound guy, and then my wife was like, "You quit games because you travel too much." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, that's right,
right." But I didn't like that travel.
Well, and it was funny, and it was a really funny time and it was when I was interviewing Funkworks in I think it's Longmont,
Fort Collins.
Oh, Fort Collins.
Yeah,
yes, that's right. Fort Collins Funkworks. Brad and Gordon, they're the 2 owners. I was chatting with them, and like. I think Brad was an accountant and Gordon was an engineer that made bike frames.
Okay,
and he was also like a national champion saison brewer. So there's a on home brew side. He knew what he was doing. But I was like, had this moment goes, I could do this too. Not just because, like, I don't think I could do what they could have done technically, but I just like, you know what? I think just people can do this. You can. And so I came home to Edmonton. And before I started the brewery, I kind of became the exec director of the Brewers Association there and kind of ran that for a bit.
But you were at no point so far a brewer yourself, not a home brewer, nothing.
And I'm still not a brewer.
Wow, amazing.
I do a lot of emails.
Okay, yeah. Well, most brewers, most owners end up doing that too. Yeah. But I love hearing this, Ed, because... Well, go on. I just love hearing it because you're right. Anyone can do it if you have the right mindset.
Yeah.
But you speak like a brewer, so I'm just surprised to hear that you're not.
I spend a lot of time. I have brewing diplomas. I'm very academic. I've done diplomas and I've done lots of courses in it. And I've read lots of books, but I'm around it all day, every day.
Got it. Because I'll be honest. Sometimes when I'm reading a bio and it's an owner of a brewery and nowhere in there does it say brewer, I get worried about the interview, right? Because or like, okay, it's going to be a sales interview. Like those are never fun. As a beer radio host, that a sales interview is never fun.
There's like when they would give me the sales guy instead of like one of the, I'd be
like, okay, I'll make it work.
Yeah. No, and so for me, like I just had a real passion for it. And I like, I'm a BJCP judge and all that stuff. Like I've done a lot of stuff to kind of get there. And then I started it. And then for me, the key thing was hiring some really strong brewers. Like my brewery, I have 2 breweries. I have a clean brewery, we call the Market.
Okay.
Does ales and lagers. Lagers all the way from 7 years ago, so we're ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
A guy named Rob Monk runs that. Rob was the head brewer at Yukon, brewing way up in the Yukon, and the head brewer at Spinnaker's. He'd been in the brewery industry 17 years when I hired him. So he's a super veteran. Whereas Doug Cheknita, the head brewer at the Monolith that does the spontaneous and mixed ferment beers, he'd worked, he was from Edmonton. I met him through this brewing consultant that said Doug was working in Quebec at this brewery called Trou de Diable. And he said, "Oh, you got to meet Doug. He wants to do what you're doing." And then Doug, I got to know him. I said, "Hey, let's work together." Then he went off to work at Cantillon for a year. So I visited him at True, I visited Cantillon, and going to Cantillon blew my mind. Like I'd spent a lot of time, like I said, in Austin at Jester King. I'd been to Fort Collins and I saw New Belgium and all the stuff they did. But then it was going
great sour program there too.
Great. But then going to Brussels, your head just goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had a chance to. Spend a lot of time at Cantillon and Dre Fontaine, and just kind of learned a lot more about like what I wanted to do. And then we kind of came back and built some buildings and filled them with barrels, and have been tinkering away in the solitude.
You started with the clean brewery?
Yes, exactly.
Just that, and then built a
second brewery. There's 2 sites.
Two different sites.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you didn't want to do it all in the same building?
Yeah, and there's not enough space. So it was interesting because when I was doing the beer diaries, like I kind of knew the second part of the beer diaries, the last little bit, I knew I was going to leave, and I just started like exploring breweries that I wanted to kind of almost recreate. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple in Denver that were in neighborhoods, and so they're like in these little neighborhoods. I'm like, it'd be so cool to have because back in my home in Edmonton, they were all industrial. You were not allowed to put a brewery in anything but an industrial, like a medium industrial space. Like it was crazy. So no one had tap rooms. Like there were no tap rooms back when we're talking the 2012, 2013s. Like there's no tap rooms. And so I came back, so I'm going to make a neighborhood place. And then turns out like the city guy said, no, you can't do that. You can't put it there. But you can make a restaurant that happens to have a brewery. So I made a restaurant called Bira, which is like, it's funny. It's now been on Canada's top 100 best restaurants list.
Amazing.
So it's like a finer dining beer restaurant, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's really funny because it was accidental. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of make fun of you for that. Like, oh, they tell me how to do a restaurant, so whatever. I opened a fine dining restaurant. So it's not like it happened without thought.
No, but so the tricky thing with key thing with all these things is my approach to all this stuff is I don't do it myself. I find someone who can do it, and then I give them all the tools and I help them. So I had this chef, Christine Sanford, and Christine was super talented. Everyone said got to hire Christine, and she created the menu and the restaurant. Like, so now my job is to make her successful. It's the same thing in video games, because while me and my business partner made the first few games, eventually we were just helping other people make games. Like, we're kind of the editors and the mentors, and so
facilitate talented people.
Yeah, it's like the easiest thing you can do is find super talented people, help them be successful, and then I'm super lazy, so I can sit back and let them do all the awesome work.
Absolutely.
And then I just write the emails.
I love this.
I just write emails.
You're my idol right now.
No, and then so and the thing is, that's how a good way to work is.
Yeah,
you know?
you're right.
And it's hard to do, but and so that's kind of like how it all happened. And then we opened the Clean Brewery restaurant. That would have been like 7 years ago, and then 6 years ago the Monolith opened. And so for years, like for 4 years, we had no tap room or anything at the Monolith because it took years. We were still,
and the Monolith is the sour, not sour. You don't call it the spontaneous.
Yeah, spontaneous mix.
Yeah.
No, sours are. Oh man, we can go into that for hours. Like,
sure,
you can call these beers sour in the sense, but they kind of undersells them. Like that's.
I think you're right.
That's the
I think in the beginning it was helpful. To help introduce, but it did become, there were diminishing returns after a while because people were like, sour. So you're right.
Well, no, that's interesting because you go like, well, what's different between mine and the kettle sour? They're both tart. They may or may not have fruit. Mine takes 4 years to make. Theirs takes 4 weeks to make.
Right.
But there's a difference in the tasting, but you got to get the consumer to taste it first, right? And then they'll kind of get it. But if they just like see it on a menu board, they're like, well, that one's more expensive, and they're both the same thing, so why would I drink it?
Yeah.
And so it's I find like with our beers, like just like the experience you had, is when you have people try them, they're like, wow, this is remarkable. And like,
sure,
yeah.
So I'm skipping ahead, but only because I'm making some assumptions here.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were most excited even before you opened the first brewery about spontaneous beer, but you started with a clean brewery.
Yeah.
And I wonder if maybe you sort of thought about it like whiskey or something. Like you're like, well, I need to do something for 4 years until this stuff's ready.
That's true. But though I really do like all beer.
Okay, got it.
No, but you're right. Like I think it's a true thing because like. Yeah, if when you're making whiskey and if you're not making vodka, you're spending a lot of money with no return.
You're not selling a thing for a while, yeah.
And so that's very similar, absolutely.
Okay,
but I think the thing is a clean brewery. Like we did a lot of fun things. Like we did a bunch of recipes, ale, then we did them all via lager, then did heads to heads. Like we did a lot of do a lot of fun experimental. Like we literally don't make a normal hazy, even though it's still the most popular thing. We make we took our wheat beer and like added a ton of hops to it, and the wheat beer is called Zesty Z. So we called Haze Z and Hazy, and people are like, "Was it a hazy?" It's called hazy, and it's so you can never kick that like the little bit of banana and
like clove.
But then when you add Galaxy and Enigma on top of it in buckets, it's quite different.
Right.
So we do like we kind of do funny things on our clean brewery is not a regular clean brewery, I would say. We do a lot of, like, nothing's ever on style. It's all kind of on partials and on the edges of style and stuff.
Okay. And it's called Blind Enthusiasm?
Yeah, and we call that
both?
We made our marketing really confusing. It's like Blind Enthusiasm is the parent, and then one's the Market Brewery and one's the Monolith.
Okay. But those are locations, right?
So it kind of makes sense. It's all just Blind Enthusiasm. Like, and I think the Monolith, we just use that to denote, like, when a consumer picks this up, and again, it's in bottle. That's the other thing. It's like a big bottle. People are like, well, this is going to be different. Right?
Yeah, of course. Well, okay, so tell us what this beer is again. We're going to get us to a break. Yeah. So before we do, and you said this one's available now? Or
in Canada.
In Canada, yeah. And that's right. We have a pretty big Canadian listenership.
Yeah. No, so in Edmonton, we just released it on this past Saturday, 1, 2, 3 year. And, the tradition of goods is you have a differing amount of each year, but we actually have equal 1, 2, 3 year. Neutral red wine barrels, and then conditioned for 10 months. Just a really light, refreshing. It's got like lots of dimension to it, and it's just it's surprisingly clean, but also like got a lot of character for our first Spontaneous Manifesto. It's called, right?
Exactly. All right, you can go check it out.
Hold it up to the camera.
Hold up to the camera right there if you're watching us on YouTube, and then you can also go to blindenthusiasm.ca, and you can check out all the beers that they have there, including that one. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more from Blind Enthusiasm. Hang in there. Welcome back to the session. We are still hanging out with Blind Enthusiasm from Edmonton, Canada, tasting some great beer. Some of the first out of their spontaneous program, I'm learning right now, even though you guys have been a brewery for 7-ish years. Yeah. So is this really the first year you've released spontaneous beer?
100% spontaneous was the first one.
Okay, got it.
So if you look at it, it took 3 years in barrel, took 10 months of, so it's almost 4 years just to make the beer. And then I'll be honest, the first couple spontaneous batches we did, like we had to dial things and it didn't always work out great. We learned over a couple seasons on how to dial in our beers, and we're really happy with how they're going now.
Okay.
The spontaneous stock is like super solid.
And is it going into barrels?
Yeah, so it goes right into barrels. So right out of the cool ship, so cool ship, it goes in. I can talk a little bit about that. Like we do it twice a year. So we brew in the spring and in the fall. We want temperatures around 0 Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit, around freezing.
Yeah.
We want kind of an average of that, and so we'll usually put it in about 4 o'clock at, just under boiling, and it comes out for us at like 18 Celsius, which I'm guessing that's probably 60-ish.
So you're not even running it through a heat exchanger?
No.
Okay.
Because
of
where we are.
Ship. Yeah.
Because of where we are. So we if we wanted to, we could freeze it in the middle of winter. Just open those windows at -40. But no, so we actually don't run any kind of secondary stuff. We just go right into a cool ship. We open the windows. We actually have a computer program that controls the room.
Okay.
So we have a temperature probe in the beer. We have automated louvers. We have a fan system that pulls air across, and it actually adjusts the speed of the system based on the temperatures of the ambient liquid or the liquid and the ambient air outside. So
amazing.
It's kind of a space age cool ship room. It's at the top. It's right above our tap room, like 3 stories up.
Yeah.
And it's on the corner of the building. It goes in and comes out, like I said, 18 Celsius, which I'm guessing it's probably in the 60s. And then from there it goes down into our a tank, and then we just put it right into barrels. We cross our fingers.
Wow.
And
so it inoculates basically overnight.
Yeah.
Goes down into some sort of stainless tank.
Yeah.
Just to get it, but it almost immediately goes into barrels.
Yeah,
then.
same like that morning. Wow. Goes in the barrel.
Okay, so you don't let it sit in stainless for a period of time. It just new barrels.
Typically, no, not new. They've been used. Like we get barrels from all over the world. We have a bunch of brokers we work with. They're typically 400 to 500 liters, so like larger size puncheons.
Okay,
that'd be like 100 gallon, like 80 gallon to 100 gallon.
Okay,
puncheons. We have barrels from like California, Sicily, like northern Italy, France, some from Canada.
Have any of them had beer in them before?
Never
or they're just wine.
Typically wine, though you'll see we do some, like the next beer we got up is actually Marsala. So Marsala is a fortified wine from Sicily. We actually did a bunch of beers in Marsala barrels, which you could also do port. We've done cognac, Armagnac. So we actually do a number of more so our mixed fermentation beers. This next one will be mixed fermentation into like interesting barrels to kind of catch flavor from the barrel.
Got it.
We're typically doing like second, third, fourth fill red wine barrel. So they're fairly neutral. You're getting maybe a little bit of tannin out of them, but generally we're using it just for the physical characteristics of the wood and the permeation of oxygen and stuff.
Sure. So. Okay. Well, and part of the reason for this line of questioning is I think I read that you're the largest barrel program in Canada?
One of them.
I
mean, we have like 500 puncheons, which is a lot.
Yeah.
We have 4 rooms, over 2 stories. I mean, one of the biggest, I think, it's one of those things that, like there's guys like this brewery in Quebec called Oval, on the way in the East Coast. I mean, Bellwoods has a big program, but they use more fooders. So, if you kind of counted like literage or barrelage, we're right up there. Like we're in the top 5, right? And we're just getting started. So we're pretty full of barrels though. Like I don't think we're not going to be giant, but we want to be like turning beers really reliably.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, especially because once you get started, you've waited this long, you've had to get it going. Now you want to just keep the flow of bottles coming out.
Yeah, and that's the plan.
That's the name of the game. Yeah. So. You clearly then still sell more clean beer until this ramps up? Or is that,
yeah, exactly.
And do you think that'll always be the case, or will this overtake
things? This will overtake it. I mean, we're also because we're a small pub brewery. Even though we sell kegs to restaurants, we're still a fairly small pub brewery.
Got it.
Our combined right now is probably still under 1,000, probably under 800 barrels, like 1,000 hectoliters. And so we might get to 2,000, with the barrel programming almost being all of that. So we're not going to be a giant. It's funny because I think in the big picture of things, if you can turn 500 or 100 barrel tanks, like you're going to make way more beer than us. But
I see.
You can't do that. Like we take years
to build up that volume.
Yeah, but once we got it, we can kind of like churn it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
it's all blended too. So everything's blended. So we usually do from anywhere from 2 to 8 barrels blended. We actually sit down in a group. Like all the blending is done as a team. There's about 5 of us that blend. We actually sometimes bring in guest blenders to kind of like, if someone like is a wine person we know, we go, hey, we're blending a Riesling beer.
Yeah.
We want you to kind of, you're a Riesling expert. Literally, we had one guy. And so for us, it's a really interesting exercise because we kind of create the beer, then we bottle condition it, cross our fingers at the other end is what we think.
Right.
And then Doug blended with Jean Cantillon, so he's
got a good palate for that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know how he knows what's going to happen, but he can kind of project like a year later and go, this is what's going to happen. You're like, yep, that's what happened.
That's always blown my mind too. After all of these years of interviews, it's still a question I have for people like that. Like I just don't get my brain also. I think I have a fairly good palate.
Yeah.
But it doesn't translate to my brain as well. So I can't like being predictive like that is just.
I think I feel the same way. Like I've like I said, I judge. I've done this for years now, but I just it's just not my skill set, And I think then what's cool about we've actually gotten this like another brewer that's doing some blends now, and it's nice because we do it as a group. Like blending in some breweries is very arcane. Like one person closes the doors and does it, and then out pops the beer. But we try and make it a team effort so we can kind of like reproduce it. We also do a lot of science, like total titratable acidity and stuff on the side of the blend, so we know acid targets, and we're very science oriented brewery. One thing we kind of say is we use traditional techniques but scientific method and analytics to get better results.
Sure. And it makes sense. Let's try the next beer.
Yeah.
And so far it's coming out in the beer because we've all had those sour beers that are too acidic and you want to love it. You want to love all the other things, but then there's something overpowering. That first beer we've had so far was just, I think, incredibly well balanced.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah. So.
That's the intention. This one is super neat. And I'm always super biased about stuff. This is a Marsala beer. So it's 24 months fermentation, a mixed fermentation beer. So we pitched the microorganisms into the wort, put it into barrels for 24 months. And the entire time it was spent in Marsala. Marsala is a fortified wine that has kind of nutty notes. It can be either, if you heard of Marsala chicken, that's the cheap stuff. It's like the dry stuff, but there's like also a very sweet Marsala, which is a sipping kind of fortified wine. So this is probably more likely the fortified Marsala. So it's got like, you'll probably find some like maple syrup and some sweet notes, but these are also incredibly dry. There's no sugar in these at all. There's zero. But this has like got some really neat tones in it.
Wow. So already by you saying no sugar added or no sugar left, is there fruit? Is there
no fruit added? These are all the esters. So these are all fermentation effects.
It has such like and it's changing as I speak. Such a complex like toffee or chocolate but so
and
many
nutty and that and then like
now it's turning into nutty.
Yeah.
As it sort of drifts off the palate. Wow, and that's just from the barrel, you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the barrel and the fermentation notes. The interesting thing I would describe ourselves to some degrees as it's maybe a bit pretentious, but masters of acid. Like the right balance of acid can accentuate certain flavors. So we're targeting, like we're actually like again, if you know total titratable acidity, we're almost always under 10.
Okay.
So we're like on the lower end, kind of where a cider or like a very sharp white wine would be. But what this does is it takes these beers and accentuates elements that you don't normally. If you just had a huge acid bomb, like you wouldn't catch all the subtlety, right? So we have it just enough that it's kind of like causing all these neat things to pop. And this one in particular, like we got a gold medal at the Concours de Lyon for this beer.
Wow!
And it's just one. And this is our best seller. This outsells everything in the tap room, probably like 5 to 1. And we're almost out of it.
Wow!
But we have another batch coming. So
okay.
We actually got like a full container of Marsala barrels. So we're this is our future is we've got these in the future. And it's funny when we made this one because Doug's like, if people just know us for this beer, hey, that's okay. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure our spontaneous will impress people
sure.
too. So,
without all of those other accents being brought out in this too, it would just be a tannin bomb also. And I love tannins, by the way. So I would say this is tannic.
Absolutely.
But because of all those other subtleties that are spiking up and down, it doesn't just taste like wood.
Yeah. And so that's a really important, that's a great point because all our beers have a fair amount of tannin, both from the barrel and sometimes the prior inhabitant. So like if it's a red wine, you'll get some red wine tannin, you'll get some wood tannins.
Okay.
So you'll get tannins. So yeah, there is that kind of like tannic effect, but because it's so fruity and so bright, it doesn't like linger, it doesn't kind of like burden your palate.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I'm giving you props. Like a lesser brewer would have gone, oh, it's fine, just put in that great barrel. And then we would have ended up with a bunch of tannins. Because even I can be like, nope, that one's just, now I'm just chewing on wood.
Yeah.
That's a fabulous beer. I can see why that's your best seller.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a cool one.
And I'm sorry, also blended?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, this case is a little bit different because it's all blended, just all Marsala barrels. So, like, what we'll typically do is, in the case of this, we'll have probably 8 Marsala barrels, and we may only use 6 and put 2 into a Grand Cru. So this is usually and sometimes we'll take some of the Marsala barrels that maybe aren't as expressive out and throw them in something else.
Okay.
So you get a little bit of this character. So we still do blend, we still select a certain set of barrels, and we still kind of pick what we think is the best for a particular blend, and some we'll sort of put into other stuff. So yeah, all still blended. Like I think probably 8 barrels in this one too.
That's delicious.
Thank you. Yeah, that one's that's why I brought it.
You got to bring a showcase. I mean, let's be honest. But
it's interesting because it's just there's a real sequence to what I'm doing today. So like the spontaneous first, 'cause it's very it's more delicate, it's more subtle. This is fairly bold. The last one will be very bold because it's a dry hop, and that you'll see a little later. But
okay,
the purpose behind this is to kind of like show a range, right?
Sure. So tell me about the relationship of beer and food. Now I realize that you sort of built the restaurant out of necessity, but you don't seem like the type of person who's going to stop there.
No. I it's interesting for us because and it does absolutely dictate the beers we make. So when we started, because the restaurant was primarily supported initially by the clean beers.
Okay,
and that's why we don't have like anything like double dry hopped IPAs and stuff, because those don't go that well with food.
True.
We have quite a few lagers, we have quite a few wheat beers. We did saisons for a while. I mean, it's kind of crazy, like in the world today, where saisons are still like they don't sell at all. Like, so don't use the term saison. You it's a mixed ferment or some kind of interesting fermentation. But
right.
So we do a lot of subtler, food friendly beers. What's come along with we've had these new ones out, like the monolith beers are great because the acidity is phenomenal with like fattier foods, right? Like, it's still you're still having a challenge with like big red meat. Like I think beer is tough with big red meat. Some of the richer, we actually have done a couple of red wine barrel that are quite like with a slightly different wort. That's a little more aggressive, a little more Munich in there, for example.
Sure.
And those can kind of hold up red meat, but otherwise it's like these are better with lighter meats, almost anything, and I think that's the only kind of gap we've got.
Okay. But I assume the menu is sort of purpose built as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So all of those foods you're just working together.
Yeah, our menu is it's funny. It's like, so Christine had worked in Belgium for a couple of years at a couple of famous restaurants in Belgium, and so she came back to Canada. Was actually working in the butcher shop, then joined us from the butcher shop after she wanted to learn to cut meat better.
Yeah.
And so we were doing a lot of Belgian inspired dishes, which of course. In our tap room, we have something called a pistolet sandwich in the Monolith tap room. If you've been to Belgium, pistolets are these little round sandwiches. That's a common, like, if you're hanging out at Cantillon, one of the lunches they bring in are pistolets.
Sure.
Like, it's kind of funny. So that's kind of stuff we serve in our tap room. And like, cheese is wonderfully cut by these beers. Anything really cheesy or anything really rich, saucy, that's where these beers really shine.
Okay. Do you sell wine?
In the restaurant, we sell wine.
You do?
Mainly natural wines.
Okay. Does the beer in the restaurant outsell the wine? Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I'll buy a lot. Yeah.
So, well, that's great. Well, because once you become one of the best restaurants in Canada, you'd think that even non-beer drinkers are coming there to try wine.
Well, I think that's what happens. But what we find a lot, and I think that's one of the really fun things about our market, like our customers. It's not your typical craft beer drinker. Like, we have a very diverse ages, sexes. Like, it's a really just complete cross section of everyone in the restaurant. So, and you're seeing tables with like whether it's a spontaneous beer or just like pints that you would look at and go, they wouldn't normally drink pints,
right?
But they're drinking pints, and they're drinking, like, we have a sampler that we call the sample doodle, because there's a shop called the Stamp Doodle on the site before, so we call it the sample doodle.
Yeah.
And so like you'll see someone like, I can't believe they're drinking a sample doodle, and
yeah,
we have like often one barrel aged and one barrel fermented beer on the sample doodle. So we have it's like, where are you going to get like a spontaneous beer on a sampler? Right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
We have that. So
whatever happens from here, I'm calling this a massive success because just when to hear you talk about that diversity of people would just be so cool to see.
Well, I think that's what we need in the business. Like I worry a lot about. I mean, we haven't even started talking about craft beer culture, but like I was there kind of in those late teens and sort of trying to help build craft beer culture, and it was a machine. But I kind of feel like it's we don't have quite the same mojo we had, and I think we're not doing as good a job as we should be of increasing the customer base. Right, we're kind of narrowing it versus increasing it. I think, which is tough. It's really tough to change.
Yeah, and so every conference I go to, obviously that sort of changing customer, change in diversity is like it's the hot topic. And, and so and this maybe is a good segue to talk about sort of the Canadian craft beer scene.
Yeah,
craft beer has almost plateaued here in terms of growth. Anyway, it's not retracting, but it's not like skyrocketing, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I think I read a recent quote from Bart Watson, the BA economist, who said it's not really fair to say that the craft beer. I'm paraphrasing, that craft beer has gone south. It's just become more like a normal industry.
Yeah.
So instead of 15% growth, we're seeing minimal growth, right?
Yeah.
Moderate growth. So anyhow, and part of that is part of maybe correcting that and getting more growth is finding a more diverse audience, right?
Yeah.
So how would you say the craft beers, both in growth and diversity, is in Canada?
It's interesting. Canada, so I'm in Edmonton, and Edmonton, Alberta is a little behind the rest of Canada. Rest of Canada being places like Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto. Sure. Those places are a little bit ahead of us, but I feel like they're probably still even a little bit behind the U.S., like the U.S. hotspots. We've actually probably plateaued too at around 900 breweries across Canada.
Okay.
My province of Alberta, 4 million people, we have 150 breweries. You've got the lion's share, Quebec, Ontario, Toronto, probably 300 each of those, then just a smattering across the... there's actually great brewing scenes in every province. And so the thing that is cool there, and it's interesting, it's very different than here, but we have a lot of very remote rural towns, like where I'm from. Like there's towns like 500 miles away, and there's a brewery there. And so the coolest thing that we've got, I think, is you got almost a brewery in every small town. And these are not close to anything. They're in the middle of nowhere. It's wonderful. That said, in the city, we're still kind of growing slowly. We're still expanding, but I don't feel we're making inroads on the pop, the audience. The audience is kind of the same. We've still got a pretty good sized hipster quotient in our craft beer scene because we're all doing a lot of good stuff with hospitality too, like food and beer, and that's what I think is working well. But yeah, the Canadian scene is, and you've seen in my city, for example, we're 1,200,000 people. We have 20 breweries, which is a really nice, it's a nice balance.
That is a nice balance.
Yeah, and then we have this thing called Happy Beer Street in Edmonton, where there's 10 of us.
Okay.
And
right.
And so we're my monolith on the north end of that. Then on the east side is Bira and the Blind Enthusiasm Brewery, Market Brewery, and then the south there's some friends Sea Change, Alley Cat. So we have this 45-minute walkable street where there's 10 breweries. And it's becoming an entertainment district, but it's so funny because that's been the places down here for years, but it's new to us. And so people are like, what? There's this place you can go and drink beers and walk it up and down the street? And you're like, yeah, I remember doing that 15 years ago in Austin or in Denver.
Yeah.
But we're kind of catching up, but I think it's looking similar. It's not looking that much different. So there's no real, I would say that maybe in a not a sad way, but there's no real secrets to be discovered there.
Okay.
I think what we're still getting a fairly young, but not the super young. I have kids in their 20s, and they occasionally go. I mean, they're very cost conscious, so that's one of the things that's really interesting with the youngsters. Is they're like, well, how cheap is it? It's like, well, it's not very cheap. Well, we're not going there. We like cheap drinks.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. Well, maybe we can make some cheaper beers, but I think at the end of the day, you got to figure out what triggers those different audiences too.
Got it. That makes me think of another thing that Bart Watson said. I heard him say at the Great American Beer Festival, and I heard him say it as the opposite of what a lot of brewers were saying. In several presentations lately, I've heard the rumor that the younger generation, younger people, are not drinking at all. So it's not just that they're not choosing beer; it's that they're not choosing alcohol. And this, I'm going to go ahead and spoiler alert: this myth keeps getting propagated, right? And Bart got up and finally said, just so you know, the same amount of people drink in every generation. It's been going on and on and on. It's every generation, every single one. It's the same amount of people who do drink and the same amount of people who don't drink. Of course, what they choose or where you live, and there might be these other things that happen that make it look different. But he said overall, we have every generation has the exact same amount of drinkers, and I found that fascinating. So I'm going to stop asking people like, "Oh, are the young people not drinking in Edmonton?"
Yeah, they're doing it elsewhere. A lot of them are pre-drinking, based on what I've seen. Like they pre-drink and then they go have 2 drinks. You know what I mean?
So it's more. It's going economics.
Yeah, I mean we're in a slightly tricky economic time right now, right? And I think the kids, the younger folks, are the ones that are like the least employed. They're having the most challenging time, so they're not going buying $20 bottles of mixed ferment or spontaneous.
Right.
So like, I mean, funny enough, they actually are the ones that sometimes do that in the restaurant, because when they want to treat themselves, they'll kind of go for the finest things.
There you go. Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
But that's like a rarity. You know?
Sure.
Like,
but yeah, don't spend where you don't have to seems to be more of a trend than I'm not drinking, right? Yeah. How about beer styles?
You know, it's funny. Like I know we talked a touch about this on the outset, but yeah, hazies are still super popular. But it's funny. Like I was saying, they seem like a newer thing, like last 3 years or so, whereas they've been down here forever, right?
Sure.
You know, it's kind of it's paralleling here. Lagers have come on big popularity as well. I mean, they were kind of always a little bit popular. Like that's what we were doing right from the beginning. They were always really good sellers. You know, it's pretty broad. Like it's pretty broad. Like I mean, I think the big stouts, pastry stouts, and those aren't really a thing up there that much. It's kind of like a rarity. Barley wine's always this funny kind of like there's
stepchild here.
People like it. There's this sort of secret barley wine community that drinks them, which is just like down here. Yeah, I think it still ends up being. We've kind of moved from hazy a little bit to West Coast IPAs. The spontaneous mixed ferment beers. It's like everywhere. They're still a segment. You know, like I'm heartened there as I am here, where every store will have kind of like a whole bunch of cans of hazies and IPAs, and they'll have some lagers, and then they'll have a little shelf of my bottles. And I'm like, okay, at least I'm still there. Yeah. You know, and I think that's what we see here as well. But like I said initially, like a lot of the sort of stuff that's fun, like English beers, like we do a really great English bitter. My head brewer Rob that worked at Spinnaker's was an English style pub, the oldest pub in Canada. Nice. From Victoria. I think the oldest operating one. There's one that maybe before it, but like the oldest continuously running. They would have like this amazing English bitter. They have these casks, and we do casks, but just because no one else does them, and they actually they do really well. But English beers, like, nice. But people, they don't sell that well,
and that's here too.
Which is frustrating because they're really good.
Right, my beer buyer gets frustrated here because he likes all of the spectrum too. Yeah, but he can't buy them all, and he'll get He'll get the 2 people a week that come in and ask for that amber ale or that English mild, and it sounds all of a sudden like people want them. Yeah, like, hey. So he'll pick one up, and then that amber ale will sit on tap for a month, you know. Yeah,
it's kind of the weird. I think it's like I think that, I mean, the appreciation of beer, there's a little bit of shock and awe to it. So what I mean by that is like these beers that kind of like really surprise you from a palate perspective. Like hazies are interestingly aggressive, right? Like, but at the same time, they can be very, very drinkable.
Sure.
So it's this funny thing where they're very new. Like that sort of like flavor profile has not really been done in beverage before, and very unique. So people, I can see why they're popular, but I'm a little surprised that they've kind of really maintained it for so long. I don't think it's a bad thing. I drink them too, but
I think the skill that's gone into it, I think they're difficult to make. So they've
gotten much better too.
Yeah. Like this show in the past with my co-host is known for bashing hazies, right? And in some cases, rightly so. What I found is that as the more skilled the brewers get at the style, right? So you guys might just be at the start of that too, before they become very, very palatable. And
we've got a couple really good hazy makers in Alberta now, and so consequently they're very popular. You know, because. Like I think I find the biggest challenge on hazies to some degree is actually excessively sweet, and it's hidden away under all the layers. But then something's wrong. If you really think, you discover there's a lot of sugar in them, which shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, I'm going to get us to a quick break. We got another beer to try, and we've got a little more to talk, and then we've got a little get to know Greg segment too.
Exciting.
Something I've been doing for a little while now. So, all right, hang in there. It's The Session, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for hanging out with us. We are still listening to The Session, and we're still talking to Greg from Blind Enthusiasm out of Edmonton, Canada. We're talking beer, and we're talking locations. We're doing that off the air, and we're talking Canadian beer styles and all of that. And we've got a little bit more to do because we got another beer to try. And I can tell just from the couple we've had so far that you guys are... well, you've kind of brought it up, too. You're traditional, but you're experimental.
Yes.
You're experimental, but you're high-tech, right? So, like, you know, I love that it's spontaneous, but a super high-tech, like, cool ship room.
Yeah.
So you guys are kind of really blending all of, well, your passions, really.
Yeah, no, and I think my brewers are also just, you know, there's always an opportunity to improve, you know? And I think that... Like, we're not, but just by virtue of my background, having been in video games and stuff, I'm not afraid of technology. So we're kind of, as a company, embrace it and use it in some degree in the brewing process. And that actually really, you know, it's all about, like, better product. Like, one of the things we do, for example, is we really keep a surprisingly clean, like, brewery in the spontaneous and mixed ferment. So people are like, well, why do you do that? It's like, well, we're throwing in a bunch of random organisms. We don't need even more organisms being tracked in. You know, we actually people put booties on when they come in our brewery, and they're always like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, this is just what we do."
That's the way to do it.
Because we don't want strange things adding to our strange things.
Yeah,
we don't need more.
My favorite sour breweries, with the exception of Cantillon, does the same thing.
Yeah,
but Cantillon can do whatever the fuck they want. They've been doing it for 200 years. So
long time.
Yeah, anything that's there belongs there.
So I'll pour this next one out.
Yeah.
This next one is called Astra Primursa. Astra Primursa is part of our dry hop series. We do a number of dry hop beers, probably about 3 or 4 a year. This one's a mixed fermentation blend. We've got next year coming some spontaneous dry hops. So this dry hop is EKG and Amarillo.
Okay.
So we tend to have like to do a traditional kind of a noble style with a modern style. And the intention for these beers is just to kind of like use the acid to express the hop in a unique way. And this one I think is among the most punchy and aggressive, very, very fruit forward. Still very clean. You know, it's this is purposeful again for what I'm showing you. This is like the most extreme of the hoppy beers that we do. I feel like an IPA drinker would probably drink this and like it. Again, almost no sugar, basically none. A lot of fruit character, fruit from the hops, but also, you know, you get like the grapefruit rind and a lot of and some orange marmalade from the EKG, but just really bold, expressive.
And again, same wort as all the other beer?
Same wort,
you guys just use one wort for
90%. We actually have we do a darker wort on occasion for we put some Munich malt in that, and then just to do a little bit darker. But 90, like all the ones we've been trying today have been the lighter, the standard
Got
wort.
Yeah. So standard wort, spontaneous.
This is mixed.
Firm.
So, yeah.
Okay, mixed. Yep. And then the other main difference would be as dry hopping.
This one's dry hopped.
Okay.
I think
tannins in this one too, but I almost think some of them are hop tannins.
It could be.
Yeah.
This one's like I said, this is almost like this is why I go IPA drinkers I think will probably like this because there's familiar flavors, but they're sort of different. Our hopping rates, I never know them off the top of my head because I just kind of always forget, like, is it 3 or 30 grams per liter? It's actually, as Doug would say, they're small. They're lower hopping rates than typical, but the acid really accentuates it.
Okay.
All I know is we use about 10 kilograms for about 40 hectoliters of beer, so 4,000 liters, whatever that works out to.
Got it. And they're fresh, new hops, right, as well.
Exactly, because actually, I didn't mention, we follow the true lambic tradition, and we use aged hops. We've been aging hops for years. We actually even bought hops like 10 years ago.
Okay.
Right when we started buying hops, whole leaf, whole leaf hops, and we actually have we've developed a method of aging them in such a way they don't get cheesy at all. They get very tea-like. It's really quite delightful. And we've kind of typically they're almost always low alpha. They're usually under 6%, under 5% even. A lot of them initially were noble, but we actually started using some like American, like Willamette and Liberty, and they've actually turned out really good. We've been really happy with them.
Okay.
I mean, they're cultivars of those nobles as well, but just like a lot of low alpha, and the hops are in a sense used to dial the acidity. So more hops means less acidity, right? So we've kind of refine our output. That's really what we've done. We figured all the triggers and all the levers to pull to kind of get certain outcomes we want from the actual barrels. It's still random to some degree. You'll have a batch it's amazing. You'll have the same batch of beer in the same sort of set of barrels, and they'll all taste slightly different, and one will taste radically different. You're like, why? We don't know. Something was in there that maybe wasn't unexpected or whatever. So
sure. So I remember the first Belgian style beers. They were Belgians, by the way, so I should say Belgian beers.
Yeah.
That were putting American hops in them. Do you remember that? Like, if we're talking 15 years ago now.
Yeah, I think Duvel did a couple.
They were trying it out.
Yeah.
Wasn't a fan. Later on, they got better at it too.
Yeah.
But this is it's a great mixture. And to me, I guess the main difference is because it does still have a lot of the stone fruit coming out of it. It does still have but there's just a little bitterness. There's just a little bit of addition. And I'm sure if I had those hops next to me, I could smell what you put into. I'd also pick that up, right? But spontaneous beers are still pretty powerful on their own, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of esters and a lot of flavors on them, yeah.
So when you get into this, I would be curious to try one with one of yours with one set of dry hop and then a different variety, right? So that I could really pick it out, especially since you're doing the same wort.
Yeah, no, and we do a number of we probably do 4 different dry hop beers a year. And like I said, we're kind of mixing and matching different hops, usually a noble and a modern, and just to get kind of a unique character, right? So
sure.
This one's neat. I mean, this one's just I kind of find this one, like, for folks that don't really know these beers, but they like hoppier beers. I'm like, try this, and they're always like, wow, that's really something, and
a little bit of the best of both worlds.
Kind of, yeah.
So this one's called Astra
Primursa.
Okay, got it.
We have complicated names.
Yeah.
So there's
only complicated the more you drink.
Yeah, and so there are a lot of S's, so it's hard to pronounce if you're slurring after drinking too much beer. And
yeah.
So there's always a little method to these. Like Astra Primursa we use a Latin name if there's a mixture of countries. So there's English and American. So we did a beer called Fruchtbombe, which means fruit bomb. It's a Mandarin in Bavaria whole melon beer, and Fruchtbombe means fruit bomb in German.
Nice,
and it's German hop. So we have little. Probably no one will ever really care about we put all this care into all these funny things.
Yeah.
Petit Peu is the one I mentioned with the French hops earlier.
Nice.
And they're 2 French hops, but it's really funny because we do all this stuff, and I'm not sure if anyone cares, but we like it.
The beer nerds care, and the people on my show care.
Yeah, they can search out the secret of all our dry hop names.
There you go.
Now that we've done this, so.
Well, if you want to go learn more about the beers and the different ones they have, like I said earlier on the show, you can go to blindenthusiasm.ca. They've got a great list of beers that are current, and you have a little past beers tab, which is super cool.
Yeah, well, because these are all cellarable, there's no beer that is ever gone. I mean, our clean beers, we they are the ales and lagers. You shouldn't keep those too long. Don't keep a hoppy beer for more than 3-4 months. You just drink them fresh. Our barrel aged beers, we do some really super cool barrel aged beers. We do like dark lagers with bourbon barrels. Rob had worked at a brewery called Yukon Brewing up in the Whitehorse, way up north, and they have a really, really great distillery called Two Brewers. They're actually one of the top distilleries in Canada, and because he worked on them, we can get their barrels. They give us their barrels, and he actually probably made the original wash on these that turned into whiskey, 5 years ago, and now they've used them a couple times. So we've been doing Yukon Meadows using their, again, dark lager with honey. Our brew house doesn't allow us to do super high gravity beers, so we often will have to supplement with some kind of adjunct to get the ABV up. So we're doing 10% dark lager beers. But the cool thing about them is even though they're big, they're really drinkable. So these are we have quite a range. Coming down to the States will be these. And if there are importers in the audience, please reach me.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm actually talking to folks right now, but I think we want to get down here. We think there's a really neat opportunity for these beers. There's a great bunch of beers down here already, but I think we can kind of slot in the shelf in a positive way.
I couldn't agree more. It's part of how we found you and reached out to you too, because I think your beers would fit in just great here. And there's not, there's less and less breweries spending this amount of time on true spontaneous fermentation. So
yeah, well, it's interesting because the biggest thing we've kind of learned in that regard is you can't dabble in this. This is the days of hey, I got 4 barrels in the corner and something's going to come out and it'll be good. They don't exist anymore. Half the time it's not good, half the time it's okay, but you can't reproduce it. End of the day, we make this our mission. This is something we do, and we focus on it, and we don't make anything else at the monolith. That's it. This is all we do.
Love it. All right, you're going all in. So
yeah.
Well, plus you got the clean beer to back it up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, you want to play Get to Know Greg?
Sure. I don't have a choice. I'm tied to this chair.
Yeah, we got. This is how I like to end the shows now because we're running out of time here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with one. Yeah, this one's fun.
Sure.
If I was going to force you to get a tattoo tonight, here in Concord, what would it be?
Probably the hop grenade, I think.
Yeah.
That would be... it's funny you say that. Like, I've got a fresh tattoo on my inner arm here.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I got that. My daughter really, really wanted a tattoo. And so I'm like, okay, if you get one, I'll get one.
Okay, yeah.
My wife, not super happy about it, but... Yeah, I've got a couple. I've also the Star Wars. I worked on a Star Wars game, so I've got a Star Wars tattoo. And
that's amazing.
My wife has to give approval though, so
sure.
I'll have to call her,
send her the hop grenade.
Show me your logo, and then be like, I'm not sure.
Hey, that's still the best answer I've ever gotten.
She picks location, right?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Don't worry, I won't make you do this, but that's a great answer.
I think it's a cool logo. Man.
You like music?
I do like music.
All right, here's one. In your opinion. And again, right now,
okay,
who's the best band in the world, either past or present? I know. You could change your mind tomorrow, so just know that.
I have to say the National.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason I say the National is it's dad. My daughter calls it dad music, and I'm a dad, so I like dad
but
music.
It's like sad dad music.
It's sad dad music. They're so diverse. I mean, they do a lot of really cool stuff.
So great.
So that's my kind of like... I kind of listen to them, and it's funny. I always come back to them. That's the funny thing is I'll kind of like do something else for a year, then come back to the National.
I love it. You're doing great so far. What's the weirdest food that you like?
That's an interesting one. I'm largely vegetarian. I eat fish.
Isn't that called something too?
Pescatarian.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really, really like raw tofu. Just to eat raw tofu, it's got no flavor.
Wow,
it tastes weird,
that's weird.
I really like raw tofu. I could just eat raw tofu.
You just open the package and just eat it. Amazing.
And it's just like a weird. Like I feel that's pretty weird.
I think it
needs
that's
seasoning,
weird.
but I still like it.
Yeah, by most people, the first time I ever had tofu I liked was some chef just seasoned it perfectly.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's terrible.
You're like, no, it's fine. Is there a beer or brewery that inspired you the most to come do this? And maybe you've already said this.
I kind of said, I would say Jester King.
Yeah,
I mean, it was such an amazing, it's kind of like the stars align, the opportunity exists. I don't even know the year, probably 2009. If I find out what year they started, that was the year that I was going there, and it was crazy because my friend would ride his horses there. So they're in Dripping Springs outside Austin, and I'd stay at my friend's house, and I'd drive there. I wouldn't drive; I could take a cab or Uber there, and him and his wife would ride their horses. They had a post you could.
That's the coolest thing.
And we just have beers and hang out, and I got to know the folks there. And then the funniest thing about after when I did the Beer Diaries in Austin, a bunch of the guys when we stopped doing it went to work at Jester King. Like Peppy the farmer was my PR guy on the Beer Diaries.
Wow!
And so it's really funny because I had this funny connection with them. But I mean, I think I have tremendous respect for what those guys do. Like I really, really do.
Heck yeah.
And they've evolved. I mean, they've had to evolve, and that's part of the reality. But I just love that they really brew with their passions first, and that's kind of what they do.
Sure. And you've sort of followed in that footstep.
Tried.
Yeah.
Tried.
Yeah. Okay. You seem to have many talents. But what's a talent that you don't have that you've always wished you could possess if you could?
Oh, that's a really interesting one.
And I'll give you one from me while you think about it, so you don't even have to listen to me. But I've always wished that I could sing like Robert Plant, like really belt it out, right? Like Chris Robinson, just belt it out.
I can sing okay, but not like that.
Yeah,
I think. Oh man, that's a really interesting one. That's a tough question.
Yeah.
What do I wish I could do?
Yeah.
I wish I could finish my tasks.
That's a skill, man.
Like I do finish them, but I'm just like I just have so many things, so many plates.
Right.
Always rolling. Yeah, I don't know. I think
that's good enough.
Yeah, I think I wish I could finish more things and close more conversations or items.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm obsessed with my cause I make a to-do list and throw it away, then make another one and throw it away, and I'm like, it's just awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah, I can relate to that. All right. If your food is bad at a restaurant, do you say something?
I generally haven't, but I think, it's interesting you say that. I'll usually tell someone else. I'll usually, I was at this one place with my friend, and this place she always went and said, you should tell them this is like really, really, really greasy. It's just not eatable.
Right.
Why don't you tell them? They don't know me. Like they'll trust you. And
yeah.
So yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think you can be constructive about it. Like as like, and again, being involved in owning a restaurant, if you can say specifically what the issue is. Like one thing, it's a really interesting one. Like over-salting is a really common problem, but then under-salting is, in the chef's mind, worse.
Right.
So that's why you will typically... So it's kind of like if it's under-seasoned, that's worse than over-seasoned. And it's funny because, like, if it's under-seasoned, then you can season it. But they want it to come out perfect. Like, they're not expecting to have it come back and re-season it, right? So I think I would... be more likely in a constructive way to sort of and explain clearly what the issue is. And I have done that before, but I've often used proxies.
Yeah. I'm similar. I always like this question because a lot of times you'll get, especially from restaurateurs, you have to, isn't it? Don't you want to know? And I'm like, yeah, well, I do. Yeah. But not everybody does. And I have said things at times, nicely, constructively. No one wanted to hear it.
Yeah, no, and that's actually a serious thing. Is I mean, we've done this, and like someone I knew was like, "Yeah, do you want another one?" Like, what? It's not comping it. Like, you're not like with the same bad thing. Like,
I was at a place the other day. This is kind of the same, but not. I got halfway through my beer, and a gnat or two landed in it.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, "Hey, could I just have another one?" And kind of looked at me, and I was like, "I mean, there's like bugs in it now." And we were sitting inside,
Oh yeah.
And I finally, I'm like, I mean, I'll pay for it, I guess. And they're like, yeah, okay. And they put it on my bill.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, that's weird.
I think I think it's kind of a sign of the times because like at the end of the day,
everything's expensive.
It is, and if creating a positive customer experience is always valuable, and having that longer term customer, you treat someone well in that circumstance, they'll kind of go, I trust that place, I like that place, and you don't. I mean, you kind of cut them off as a customer, and maybe they feel that that's okay, but
sure,
I don't know. It's a weird one.
It is a weird one. It's always weird. All right, good or bad? What's a habit that you've picked up from your parents?
Oh, that's an interesting one. What habits have I picked up from my parents?
I think I picked up procrastination from mine.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's a really interesting one. I think, like, if anything, probably from my mom staying up too late. That's and I mean, I kind of kick that every once in a while, then I fall back into it. My mom is like an incredible night owl, and so like I'm both, but then I'll always fall back into night owl. Especially when I'm playing video games. If there's a video game I love, I'm like, oh, it's the sun's coming up. I better go to bed.
Yeah.
Better go to bed. It's time for bed.
I always thought I'd grow out of being a night owl. It's not happened yet, and I'm not young anymore.
But I can flip. I'll flip to early and go early for months, and then suddenly something will flip me, and I'm like, I'm doomed, and I'm like night owl.
I think that's a good skill, actually.
I can flip. It's bad to be night though.
What are you super into that nobody really knows about?
Some people know I'm really, really, really into fly fishing and tying flies. It's a passion of mine. I mean, people kind of know about it because I do talk about it a lot, but in the general world, people don't know that. And I mean, I travel and fly fish and fish a lot. So That's probably the ties. Like I tie like
you make your own.
You make tons and tons. I haven't bought a fly in like a decade.
Oh, that's awesome. So, did someone teach you that?
Internet did. YouTube.
Yeah.
Something called YouTube. Davey
Yeah.
McPhail on the YouTubes.
Nice.
He's this lovely Scottish guy who goes, oh, and here you go. You just roll this around here and pull this over there. Like he's got this lovely voice. And there's another guy named Tightlines Video. There's a couple like really, really. So you can just learn anything, and then and it's like I kind of think we're in this golden age of. You want to learn anything? It's on YouTube. Like anything.
Absolutely.
Anything. Like
Absolutely.
You want to fix your car? Like,
I was just going to say, I fix all of mine and my girlfriend's cars, and I had like a moderate amount of skills at doing that. Yeah. And now I'm like, oh, what's wrong with it? I'll figure that out. Where's YouTube?
Yeah, I was like playing around with bike like derailleurs and stuff, and I'm like, oh, you just turn this, do this, and do this. I'm like, oh, I fixed my derailleur. I'm like, wow.
It's pretty.
Like, why am I paying someone for that? I mean, they're better at it and they're way faster and more reliable, but
yeah.
I mean, if in a pinch I can do it, I'm just like, that's amazing, actually.
All right, here's kind of a weird one. Thinking about careers and jobs and people you know and people you don't know. Is it difficult to do what you do for a living, do you think? Does that ever cross your mind?
I think it's difficult because it's entirely random. And what I mean by that is like I create my own job in real time based on what's needed. So I don't have and I think I don't have any kind of job description, and I've never really had one. So I've like, when I ran a video game company, we'd be like, oh, this week I'm the head of operations, and next week I'm doing sound effects, and like, so I've always been in this like mode of like continually changing, but also being in control of it, which is wonderful. But I don't think it's hard, but I think it's hard to learn. The biggest thing I do, like I said earlier, was like kind of coaching all the people. So you have to have like I'm in the center of all the relationships, and so I can kind of like my job is like referee and coach, and like if someone's fighting, you bring them together. Someone's not talking, you bring them together. Like it's actually really easy, but it's very hard to execute because you need to.
I would call that very difficult, and I'm good at it too.
Yeah,
and I would call that very difficult.
Oh no, and it's never ending. Like when my business partner and I ran BioWare, it was really funny because we had like 900 employees at one point, and then we had like some in Ireland, like another 5. Like we had over almost 1,500 people across the world.
Wow,
and we always joked. Like everything's on fire, like literally everything's on fire, but there are certain fires that are burning more. So we just gotta like be focusing on the really bad fires, and then as soon as that one's out, you look at the next fire.
Yeah,
and like and your life is entirely, which is actually
you're a firefighter.
Yeah, and it's not good because we're still doing strategy, but like. You become very reactive, which is not a great way to work. But like I think when you're juggling so many plates or spinning so many plates, it's just like there's no, and that's why I quit. Like I quit after 20 years because I was just like burnt out because I'm just like I had a studio in Austin of 600 people and then 900 in Ireland and making this giant Star Wars game. We're between Electronic Arts and LucasArts, Lucasfilm, and I'm kind of like doing all this stuff. And I was like, it's really funny. I was visiting a friend yesterday and he says, yeah, you look so much better than back when you were doing the Star Wars game. I'm like, yeah, I was a disaster.
Right.
And now,
well, and I'm sure those lessons you've taken with you, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And then now the juggling of fires is not only probably more palatable, but there's less of them. And,
it's like, and there's less brinksmanship. Like, I mean, I'm so sad for the video game business. Like, I just heard there's a big layoffs at one company. Like, 800 people got laid off. Like, it's super tough. And it's like, it's a really tough industry. And when you're the one making those decisions, it's devastating. And so I kind of like, I like my little brewery and like what we do, and we have a great team, and everyone gets along generally. You know, you have to always kind of like do some fixing, but like it's fun. The other big thing for me was like when I used to work doing video games, it'd be like for a worldwide audience. Now I do stuff for my neighborhood, and that's so different to like be meeting the people that drink the beer and chit chatting what we can do better. Like that's just so rewarding.
Absolutely. Well, I can't think of a better thing to end on than that.
Well, thank you.
It's been great to have you. Thank you for sharing all that info. I really appreciate it. Of course, like I said, folks, you can go to blindenthusiasm.ca. Check out the website. It's a great website, by the way. Did you build? Are you a website builder too? Or
I have. Yeah. I didn't build this one, but I built the association one. Yeah, we're kind of going to upgrade it. We got it's always like it's never ending. There's so many things to do. But I think the biggest thing is I want to really showcase all our products, and I mean, it's like it could be better. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it makes me think because of all the work and it's never ending for you. I lied. I have one last question.
Oh, okay, sure.
Well, so you were ready to retire after your 20 years in the last gig. I mean, you're not really retired though.
It's awful.
Do you feel like you'll be ready to retire again?
I've kind of put. 10 years as a timeline for me right now for 10 years from now. Because I label most of the beers with, we have a team of people. We hand bottle, so we're hand bottling 100,000 bottles this year.
Wow.
We're getting a label, believe me, we're getting a bottling machine is ordered and arriving. I don't know when, soon hopefully, but like I'm very involved in like the day-to-day as well as the like stuff like this. And so I kind of want to move out of the day-to-day and just kind of, I want to like have other people run it and I can show up and drink beer in 10 years.
Yeah, there you go.
Which would be ideal.
That would be ideal.
But I mean, it's going to be a lot of work, but a lot of fun to get there.
Okay.
Cool.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah.
Thank you.
I also want to retire in 10 years, by the way.
You gotta find a good minion.
I know, exactly. Yeah, I gotta figure that out.
It's all about the minion.
Well, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. And for coming down in person. I've told you and I tell other brewers, I'm just so over Zoom, so I'm very thankful whenever brewers will come down and do it.
To come down. I've been really enjoyed coming to town and seeing the place, trying some breweries, local breweries and stuff. You guys made recommendations. I really appreciate them. It was awesome.
Great. Well, when distribution works out, I'll be expecting to carry your beer. So
that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Hey, don't forget to check out all of our sponsors. Go to beersmith.com right now. Get your free web edition for 30 days. You're going to fall in love with the Beersmith brewing software. You know that. Go check it out. Brad's a good guy. He's been a supporter for so long. Go get your Beersmith brewing software. Go to 21st Amendment. Check out all their new stuff. Go to Williams Brewing. And of course, last but never least, morebeer.com, the wonderful people over there. I've got a show coming up next with our old friend Dave Marlave, or Malia Vuvu, as we used to call him. We're going to be, he's got a whole new gig happening and a crazy story to tell us, of course. He always has crazy stories, but this might be the craziest one we've ever seen. So stay tuned for that on our next show. Congratulations again to all the GABF winners, but especially my friends at Liquid Gravity. All right, folks, we'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves and your beer.
The Session is a production of the Brewing Network and brought to you by More Beer. Check them out at morebeer.com. Find more content and live video of this show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Brewing Network. For sponsorship opportunities and information, please reach out to advertising@thebrewingnetwork.com. To reach our hosts, contact feedback@thebrewingnetwork.com.